The residents' searching journey from Anthony to Kiowa found a colloquy of aspirations, the house on North Springfield's emergence presenting an illustrious canon. Gary having never witnessed Jen's enthusiasm for something elevated to such a degree. The Bird Realty representative, although having indicated she had no knowledge of the North Springfield property's disposition, except it was in the modus operandi of foreclosure, Gary attentively noticed she had inadvertently mentioned the name of the person who garnered the house's backdoor key. Gary relating his attentiveness to Jan, asserting he would further his inquiry about the house to the person she mentioned, and with a ray of optimism, hopeful the results would be encouraging, quelling some of Jan's receptive disappointment. A Saturday morning, Gary again traversing the highway to Anthony to the Jim Gates Agency at 316 West Main, the name the realty agent had inadvertently mentioned. Trusting he could acquire more information on the complexion and disposition of the house on North Springfield. Gary introducing himself with an explanation of how he and his wife arrived at discovering their interest in the house. Jim cordially explaining his current concert with Railroad Saving and Loan, the foreclosing bank, and as a CPA he was their local representative. His cardinal concern, beside allowing an occasional display by a realty agency, was the property's security and his ongoing attempt to contact the responsible party holding the mortgage which had fallen into default. Unfamiliar with the financial world of mortgages, Gary questioning Jim about assuming the current loan, and the difficulty he would encounter. Jim responded, once in foreclosure, it would be impossible for an assumption until the bank took possession. Gary again questioned, under what circumstances could the proceedings be halted? Jim acknowledging it was not probable but possible, if the defaulting owners came forward and relinquished the property. Gary not conceding defeat, queried Jim about the owner, their current address and phone number. Gates replying, he had both an address and phone number, but the person refused to return his correspondence or calls, adding that he was well acquainted with the departed party, because when living in Anthony, he also was a CPA. Gary leaving Anthony with Laverne and Wilmetta Miller's address and phone number, the default mortgage holder now residing in Colorado Springs. Jim Gates giving an assurance, if the Millers in Colorado were willing to sign a release for Gary to assume the loan, Jim would notify the bank of the impeding action, and would help administer the contractual paperwork. The return drive to Kiowa, Gary reviewing in his head the uplifting conversation with Jim, a message of encouragement not only for him but also for Jan. A letter was immediately dispatched to the Colorado address, expounding the Wilsons' desire to purchase the North Springfield property, willing to secure the mortgage holder's obligation by assuming their loan. A week having passed with no answer, the time having arrived to place a phone call to Colorado Springs. To Gary's astonishment, it was answered, the conversation with the Millers confirming their interest in the Wilsons' proposal. A return visit with Jim Gates ensued, and the negotiations between the litigants began, but finding complications. 10 years of the original 30-year mortgage having been indemnified, Railroad Savings not wanting to yield to a loan assumption, requiring Gary to obtain a new mortgage to meet the outstanding balance for the property. The problem arising was, the bank couldn't loan the money for a house not yet contracted for. At a loss, not wanting to inform the Millers, the bank would not let him assume the loan. Gary turned to Jim Gates, who had a sleight-of-hand solution. The current Colorado owner could relinquish the property to the Wilsons with a quick claims deed for $1 and Gary would obtain a mortgage on the house for the balance owed on the original contract, contractually satisfying all concerned. The acquisition was transpiring, a loan approval needed, an interest rate to be agreed upon for a 30-year loan in the amount of $46,000. Gary visiting on the phone with a member of the bank's loan committee for the first time, expressing they would consider a monthly payment of less than $400, with the insurance premium and property tax included. The loan officer was taken aback, replying he would have to confer with the committee at their next conference. Another temporal waiting, then a call from Jim Gates, the bank, in order to keep the monthly payment down as Gary requested, agreed to a variable interest of 3% above the federal discount rate, which was the rate that banks paid the feds when borrowing money. This was more than acceptable to Gary, considering the current conventional mortgage rate on 30-year mortgage was over 10%. A second call from Jim Gates, espousing another major problem. The bank somehow failing to notice, the Millers had secured a second loan for $25,000. The equity in the house serving as collateral, a balance of $5,000 still remaining. The earth-shaking news bringing the North Springfield transaction to a standstill. The news was devastating, coming so close to completion, the time and effort, the hopes and dreams, all seemed for naught, an aura of despondency hovering over the family. Another conversation with Jim Gates, once again Gary asking his advice. Jim's suggestion that they contact the Millers and simply ask if he would renew the balance of the note as an unsecured loan, removing the house as collateral. Gary always believed in miracles, but the past months of events confirming his faith in prayer and confirmation of his conviction. Railroad Savings and Loan accepting the Millers' renewal of the note without collateral. A signing ceremony was held at the Jim Gates agency. Gary very conscious of Jim Gates' role in the acquisition of the property, his undertaking, and guidance, forever an unpayable gift of a blessing. With their signatures, Gary and Jan Wilson, now title holders of the stately monolithic structure at 602 North Springfield. Its infinity, having stood dormant through a winter and spring, would once again thrive with the presence of vivacity.